We all know that the Mega Man mainline series on the NES brought forth the Mega Man X series on the Super Nintendo. However, what about the in-between games? Such as the ones on the handheld and the spin-offs from the mainline. Okay, to be clear, this franchise has over 130 games. In this case, I won't include series like Battle Network or any of the mobile versions, because otherwise it gets confusing when done chronologically. The Rockman World series started in '91 and combines 2 Mega Man NES games per title. With this in mind, one of the most impactful Mega Man artists and producer, Keiji Inafune, was the main concept artist during the early 90s. He was getting tired of the change in new directors at Capcom, because he was the one responsible for the knowledge transfers, basically telling the higher ups what to do. Anyways, Keiji heard that the first Rockman World game would be outsourced, and he admitted that he was glad that the company's editor was a huge Mega Man fan, probably even more so than Capcom's core team. As for the art, they've added the new so-called Mega Man killers into the mix, just to make the World series more unique on its own. In the case of Rockman World 2, however, they actually went for another, way cheaper company to outsource the bulk of the work. And Keiji mentioned it was a nightmare. He said they didn't get Mega Man at all and basically screwed up the development process. With this in mind, Keiji also admitted that for the illustrations he just went freehand, not caring much about the details such as shadowing, because it was just a spin-off game with a subpar death cycle anyways. In the third installment, the main illustration was done by Hayato Kachi, and he noted that he struggled to get his art approved, simply because he had a hard time to adjust to the background scenery art this series was going for. Nonetheless, the main question is, did they go to the same outsource company as World 2? Heck no. They went for the company they used in the first installment, and stuck with them for the rest of the series. Basically, the team said they would rather pay extra for people who understand the game than anything else. While the fourth installment combined the classic Mega Man 4 and 5 in the next World title, the team dedicated a lot of their precious time to try something way more original. For instance, they gave Mega Man a cat body named Tango, and upgraded him with a whole arsenal of new abilities. This time around though, they chose space as the main theme. And to the artists this was a bit of a vague concept. At least in their experience, it didn't make the designs of the robot monsters that much easier. Except for the names, they just went for the planets in our solar system. Rockman Mega World was released in '94 as Mega Man The Wily Wars on the Sega Genesis. It was a concept based on Journey to the West. For those who don't know, it's an old Chinese novel that is quite popular that's inspired some well-known IPs as well. Anyways, Keiji said this game had nightmarish gameplay with dozens of bugs that he himself had to help out to spot. The reason was Capcom outsourced again to a new company instead of using their own in-house talents. One thing I personally find interesting is that, because back in the day deadlines were so tight, the artists can't even remember what they worked on. I've read so many comments like, "Did I draw this? I can't remember, you sure?" That it quickly became clear that the Mega Man series had so many artists working on the same drafts, designs, style normalization, color and promotional illustration, that no one person can easily claim an illustration. In other words, a Robot Master was not just done by one person, but by 3 to 4 artists. It basically sounds like a big indie development team of our current time, only back then they had hardcore deadlines. With that said, we all know that Mario likes to milk his spin-off games quite well. But what about the Blue Bomber? Capcom definitely went for it, not only with fighting games, but also with sport adaptations like Mega Man Soccer, which was released in '94. And I personally remember this game was lame, to say the least, especially the controls. Sorry if I just shat on someone's favorite game ever. Anyways, they also made a card game called Mega Man Battle and Chase, which had the game mechanic of taking the opponent's card components after beating the racetrack. This was also one of those games where the artists had to team up, some noting they collaborated depending on each other's work speed. Besides the challenges, they said they had a lot of fun designing the characters, aside from the fact that, hey wait, what the heck is Gutsman's problem? Yeah, indeed. This illustration was redone for the overseas version. Because this gesture in the West is quite similar to the "screw you mofo" motion, which ironically was aimed at the artist because he commented that it was a pain in the butt to redraw him. And now, the game you were all waiting for. The pinnacle of the spin-offs. Mighty freaking number 9. Yeah, I'm glad that I never played this game. Jokes aside, Super Adventure Rockman was released in '98 on the PlayStation. In all fairness, it's the first time I've heard about it. And looking at the footage, I personally would never give it a try. But to each their own. That said, the producer, Keiji, said it was one of the worst games in the series. And he apologized for the final product. No, this is not a joke. The reason was that Capcom was on a roll by outsourcing the franchise to the cheapest companies to make a quick buck. The game was in its end state when it was dumped on Keiji, and it didn't hold the true megaman spirit. On that note, the packaging illustration was dumped on the artist Hideki, who said that due to time limitations and lack of importance, he didn't even care to finish Rush's legs. Rockman and Forth, known as Megaman and Bass, was an extremely late release on the SNES in '98. In this case, Keiji noted that this game was intentionally a spin-off, created for players who wanted to play Mega Man 8, but couldn't due to it being on the PS1 and the Sega Saturn. Despite so, he wanted to treat this game with as much care as the mainline series. Thus, the majority of responsibilities fell on the talented artist, Ariga. He saw this as a great opportunity to show what he was made of. So he asked the producer if he had to include all 8 bosses in the packaging image. Keiji casually noted that he could do whatever he wanted, which didn't make it any easier as now he wasn't sure what to do. Hideki did note that when designing the bosses, he wanted them to be instantly identifiable by showing their distinct but one-dimensional personalities through the art. The artist also emphasized that they want to subtract any unnecessary parts as much as possible to keep designs from being too distracting. Mega Man Complete Works was released in '99 and was an ambitious PlayStation remake of the first 6 NES titles. The artists put their heads together and were very clear who was responsible for what, because they had to redraw not only the original packaging art, but also the boss artwork with deadlines as short as a week. That said, the art is great. And this was also because one of the artists, Higurashi, mentioned that he actually enjoyed creating most of the manual art for this game. This was his time to shine, so to say. And he took it to heart because he mentioned he never took a day of work. And once he finally did, however, he drew this piece. To me, that's true dedication. To stay somewhat original with the Robot Masters, they went for a more centered angle to clearly show their special skills. And although they had a lot of fun with them, it was a challenge to make the existing designs feel modern and exciting. I can only imagine that illustrating 8 bosses good enough for the final product in just 1 work week is a daunting task. Because of this also counted for the main illustrations, which although were responsible for one person, had multiple artists to back each other up. Some of them were cool reimaginings of the original. Nonetheless, this illustration of Mega Man 5 is just awesome. The artist said he used everything in his artist's toolkit to make Proto Man the focal point. One game the artists were overly enthusiastic about was Mega Man Powered Up. It was released on the PSP in '06, and despite that the artists put their heart and soul into it, unfortunately it didn't sell. And while I personally know how that feels, the producer, Keiji, said it was planned to be a game series with multiple sequels, and he finds it a bit of a bummer that this one didn't get what it deserved. As a Mega Man fan, I never played the game and I had to look up what it was about. Gameplay wise, it looks solid. That said, based on the artist mentioning that the chibi design was aimed at little kids to also sell keychain merchandise, this aesthetic probably alienated the majority of Mega Man fans. Especially in '06, most were in their teens and had already a good taste of Mega Man X. Indeed, one of Mega Man X design's requirements was to keep up with the aging fans, which definitely served the series well. The Mega Man Extreme games were Game Boy Advance spin-off releases, and due to the small resolutions, the artists noted that they refrained to add much detail to the main illustrations. This also applies for the bosses. but they admitted that their first designs were quite detailed, and were amazed that the graphics team translated their work so well into the actual game. As a weird side fact, Sutsuga said that he enjoyed drawing Iris, and made her younger compared to the X4 version to adhere to the timeline. He also explicitly said that he made sure that she was less physically developed. In case of Mega Man X Command Mission, it went for an RPG approach. Keiji, however, implied that he didn't want anything to do with it, as he sees Mega Man X as an action game, not an RPG. The packaging illustrator, Higurashi, was also not a fan of RPGs, but he explicitly had the task of making the art RPG. He admitted that he had no clue what that meant, so he just went with the flow and drew this piece. Amazed, the director's reaction was, "That's so RPG." Bro, I totally agree with this. Exactly, as you noticed by now, the artist had quite a lot of fun just being in the creative mood for the franchise. In my eyes, the design aspect of this style is really cool. In the case of Higurashi, he had this mathematical approach that X was this limitless potential while 0 was there to nullify it all. I'm fantasy light novel author GP Fuchs, and honestly it was a blast going through the Mega Man Anniversary art book as the artists were commenting and joking on each other's reactions, which is a rare sight to see.